All right, hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Ozzy and Keats. We're not great. We're just okay. And that always describes Chris Osgood, because every time we get together, I'm not at 100%, he says. I'm running a little low today. What are the physical issues that you deal with? Is this anything attached to your
Playing
athletic
days?
prowess?
Yeah, of course it is. Years and years of just getting pummeled by pucks. Knees, hips. I feel like the brain is going a bit now, though, when I'm driving over here. But certain days I feel better than most, but a lot of times when I'm headed over to do these little shows with you
Studio, yeah.
in the studio, I got to pick it up. I don't have it. I'm not 100% a lot of the times, but I feel like I'm getting there today.
I'd like to mention these three letters,
What's that?
CTE. How many times have you been hit in the head with pucks where you had your
Lots.
bell rung, and that maybe it's not just your personality, it's a mental condition caused by
You're saying I have
too
a
much.
mental...
Yeah.
Well, my one regret of not wearing a mask is that, because the mask was way more protective, but I couldn't overcome one superstition and the fact that it was just more comfortable. And I could hear better out of it, see better out of it, all that business. But now that I look back on it, it took some that... I remember Shea Weber hit me in the head once, right in the chin. It rang my bell for sure, a couple times cut. I look back on it now that I'm of the ripe age of 52, kind of, maybe I should have wore the
Are
mask.
you only 52?
Yeah.
And you look, 58, 59.
Really?
I would guess, yeah.
Like, really?
52? Yeah. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I look like a young Don Knotts. God bless him.
Who's the guy in Three's Company that you love? Furley?
Ralph Furley.
Ralph
That's what
Furley.
he played. Outstanding character.
You mentioned superstition, and we know that hockey players are very, very superstitious. Is there a great story that you have of a really superstitious teammate, or
I had guys
or yourself?
just did a tons of stuff. When I was in St. Louis, I had guys that had to throw stuff in garbage cans from distance. It almost gets overwhelming. I had a lot when I was younger. A lot of guys. Brandon Shannon had quite a few. He had to do a lot of things. I remember he said he couldn't listen to, I think it was, I don't know if it was Madonna or if it was the Bare Naked Ladies. He couldn't listen to either one of those two bands. He was not allowed to hear before a game or something like that. A lot of guys have a lot of different things. Driving to the rink the same way, do the same thing, put the shin pads on the same way, skates the same way. It gets overwhelming. The one guy that never had any was Hasek. And that's kind of what I just watching him when he came here.
Yeah.
I was wasting a lot of time, like you aforementioned, obviously question my mental capacity, is I was wearing myself out mentally with all these stuff that really didn't matter for the game.
Yeah.
Dom just sat there and clipped his nails. Just clipped his nails, talked to me about stuff that was random. It could have been anything from cars to movies to TV shows.
But he might be the most unique athlete that has ever come through Detroit.
And then there'd be there's a clock in the room that would count down, and he'd stand up at the same time, hit his pads, and say, "Let's go, boys." That was it. You never really wasted his mind. Then he got on the ice, and that's when he saved himself for that.
Well, Shanny always wore the same shoulder pads he had worn through junior, right? And they're all beat up and mangled and barely hanging on, all that kind of stuff. And lots of guys had equipment that they kept over the years.
Especially then. Now the guys wear a lot of newer stuff, but Shanny's shoulder pads had the old felt on the front, and it was Maisel just had two paper plates for the shoulder pads. It really wasn't anything more than that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see how he ever thought that was going to protect him, which it never was. But guys wear stuff and forever. I mean, even goalies. I remember I went to Long Island. I had my red stuff from Detroit still. I went there and we didn't lose for like 12 games, so I just kept wearing it. Then all of a sudden my other stuff didn't come in time. So I had this red equipment with the Islanders. There's some hockey cards out there of it, but that's the reason why I kept wearing them. So you speak of superstitions that are ridiculous. Well, that would be one of them. Wearing, and listen, orange, blue don't exactly go with red and white.
Right.
It clashes. It looks like Ralph Furley, like a zoot suit. It looked like a 70s zoot suit.
Well, and we saw Ville Husso wear his Red Wings mask as a member of the Anaheim Ducks this season because the other one hadn't been painted and it hadn't arrived. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is when you guys played at the Joe, there would be concerts at the Joe, and because you guys had the status as effectively rock stars, you could get tickets to any of the concerts that came through there. How many of those did you attend?
I was never a big concert guy. I can name on my hand the concerts I've been to.
What was your first concert?
Kim Mitchell, Medicine Arena, Patio Lanterns. You know what I'm talking about?
I do not.
Well, you can Google it after we're done. Another famous Canadian. You'd be surprised at how popular he is and his earnings for life. He's a great musician from Canada.
Okay.
Kim Mitchell, Medicine Arena, Patio Lanterns. Not a lot of people there though for that one. I have seen the Eagles.
Okay.
At the Palace.
Okay. Yeah, I have too.
I saw the Bare Naked Ladies at the Palace.
Okay.
And Drapes Maltz and I went to their locker room after, which wasn't one of my thrills of my life. Went to...
Why is that? Why was
Well, it
that
was a
one
bunch
your
of
thrills?
Canadians again. The Bare Naked Ladies. We talk about Canadian bands. We forgot to mention them.
Yes.
Because I liked them, but I didn't love
Yeah.
them then. You know, Maltby liked them. He
Right.
was enamored by them. And I also went to Kid Rock
Okay.
at Joe Louis. I went to Bob Seger at the Palace. So what's that, 5?
Yeah, that's about it.
And I saw Grinder at the Hockey Town Cafe.
The Darren McCarty.
Darren McCarty's debut album. I fought I fought Lemieux and I won. That was the headliner song, if I believe it was.
Jeez.
I was amazed that he was up there.
We went a long time. We did a story on it because we went to a little studio in, I want to say Warren or somewhere in Macomb where they were, cranking out the music
Mac
that they
was?
cranked out. Yeah, yeah.
He used to play at training camp.
Yeah.
He used to play everywhere. I'd watch, and then but then when he ripped the shirt off, I'd have to leave.
You'd seen it already.
Well, God bless him. He'd try anything. He was like, wouldn't he have a comedy show?
Yeah, right.
He's singing a band.
He's doing
Now he's doing commercials.
He's doing commercials now.
He's doing commercials now. So there's really nothing he hasn't tried. So God bless him for that. I mean, it was great stuff. I remember when he was starting this band thing, he'd be like driving around.
He was all in. He was all in. Yeah.
And wanted to be a rock star. I remember he was singing like the Limp Bizkit songs all the time. He was kind of practicing and trying to get his vocals down, I guess, if you want to say.
Well, you'll appreciate this. So I was looking up the best concerts that Pine Knob ever had.
Okay.
And they listed the top 10. The first one, before your time, it was actually the first concert at Pine Knob, David Cassidy in 1972. But you'll be most interested in this. In 1978, Dolly Parton played at Pine Knob with Eddie Rabbitt.
And Mickey Redmond was in the second row for that.
Could have been.
If you really look at the old photographs, you can see a young mustached Mickey Redmond in the second row, drooling from the second row.
Well, and as the story said, there were lots of men with binoculars at this concert, and she played along by saying, they would say, "Dolly, I love you," and she would say, "Papa, I told you to wait in the trailer."
I go back to do you think you needed the binoculars for it?
Probably.
I don't think so. I mean, you could have stood at the Palace and saw that.
Yeah.
Back when it was there.
Jeez. Then Diana Ross, so the lawn tickets for Diana Ross were $10 at the time.
10.
In 1980.
Okay.
Again, this is a Detroit News list.
Yeah.
Steve Miller Band in September of 1982 was televised to 50 stations around the country, including Channel 50 here in Detroit.
Wow.
So that was the Abracadabra days for the Steve Miller Band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that song.
Yeah.
That's outstanding stuff. Love that band.
And this one's for you.
Yeah.
In August of 1987,
Bon Jovi.
the Beastie Boys and Run DMC.
I had a run of about 4 days. I kept running into Beastie Boys songs. Either it was in my car or I was in an arena.
What'd you think?
I love the Beastie Boys.
Yeah?
I always did. Like Intergalactic, that was a song I kept hearing 4 times in 4 days. It was like somebody was telling me to start listening to the Beastie Boys again. It wasn't like No Sleep Till Brooklyn. It was Intergalactic 4 times in 4 days.
It continues there because they had to up the police presence because of what was going on at the time, from 9, which was the usual number of police officers assigned, to 52 officers, including those on
For the
on
Beastie
horseback,
Boys.
for the Beastie Boys and Run DMC, because they felt that something might get out of hand. It didn't,
May never,
thankfully.
Run DMC too.
Then we get to Eddie Money.
Walk on Water, Eddie Money.
Eddie Money was effectively the opening act for Pine Knob. It became that from 1992. That started the string. He'd open Pine Knob every year until 2019 and passed away a few months after that at the age of 70. And it was a very cool moment. I think on the day that he passed away, Kid Rock was actually playing at Pine Knob. Yeah, and played Shakin' and paid tribute to Eddie Money. Rock on, Eddie, he said at the time. 38 appearances for Eddie Money. Yeah. So I have an Eddie Money story.
I loved Eddie Money when I was younger in Medicine Hat.
So we were, the Red Wings were playing in Calgary. And so I happened to be out the day before the game, and this will shock you. I might have been stopping at an Irish pub.
In Calgary?
In Calgary. And I ended up chatting with the guy next to me who turned out to be the drummer
For Eddie Money.
For Eddie Money. And so we began talking about Detroit and Pine Knob and how many times they played there and how much the guys loved playing at Pine Knob. And so he invited us. He said, "You want to come to the show?" Because they were playing a small club at the time in Calgary.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a great invitation. And so I went to the club and I texted our colleague Trevor Thompson and told him, because he was flying in that day, it's like, we're here at this club. And so he showed up as the concert had started, and he just kind of looked at us and said, well, that guy looks like Eddie Money. So anyway, Keats, so it's like, Trevor, that is Eddie Money. He had no idea he was coming to Eddie Money.
You didn't scare him off, did you?
No, he was great.
Hopefully you didn't. Yeah. I scared off Billy Idol once. I was with Jim Bedard.
In person?
Yeah, at the West Coast Plaza, Anaheim.
In Anaheim.
Jim and I were sitting in the lounge area, watching some golf.
The lounge area.
And
you were at the hotel bar.
And Jimmy Bedard goes there, and I listen, I grew up dancing to Billy Idol. Back in the high school dance days.
We're video on YouTube. If you'd like to.
There's no cameras back
dance then. A little bit to.
No, I could not do that.
All right.
It's a shuffle left, shuffle right, hand movement up and down. That's about it. And Jimmy Bedard says, "There's Billy Idol." And I turn around and he's right there. Didn't give me whatever he does with his, but he wasn't, he was small. And I yell, "Billy!" And he took off. Right, like I was going to come after him. Like I was this crazy fan.
Stalker. Yeah.
And I was a crazy fan because I was like, I always liked Billy Idol. And I came out, it's an open lounge area in the hotel. I went this way. He was already gone. I'm like, there's no way.
Did you do your thing to go after him?
Yeah. I moved quick because I wanted to get a picture with him because I thought it would be unbelievable. And not a lot of times I do that, but it was Billy Idol. And then so I'm Googling where he's playing there. He's playing a tour in California in little venues. Couldn't get tickets; they're all sold out. So, but that was my close encounter with one of my favorite guys growing up, musicians, Billy Idol.
And he ran away from you.
Quick,
he booked it away from you.
You think Barry Sanders was fast?
Yeah,
he made a few moves around these plants and gone.
He went up the stairs. So you think
sure.
this is your close personal friend Billy Idol because you had this moment with him.
Yeah.
He couldn't have gotten away from you fast enough, which I can relate to.
He thought I was a crazy fan. I think Jimmy and I probably had something in front of us, and he thought I was maybe sitting in there too long. And I just put it down, and then he was gone.
But we're going to continue the list in a second, but who is the most famous person that you've met, would you guess?
Well, we're at the White House, if you want to count.
That's
Bill
pretty
Clinton.
good. That's pretty good.
And Emilio Estevez when you were Chelly. I got to remember all this.
How about the guys in L.A.?
Count him.
John Cusack.
John McEnroe.
Michael Jordan.
I was coaching in Grand Rapids. We were in Charlotte playing against the Charlotte's AHL team in the playoffs. And my job was to chart shots. Blash was the coach. And I was in the corner. And Chelly was an assistant too. I couldn't find him. He and there's nobody in the AHL. There's not a lot of, there's maybe 1,500 people in the crowd. I look up. Chelly's in a box with Jordan having a red wine. So I'm like, I want to go up there. This is another close encounter for me.
Sure.
So he tells me, you got to come up, Chelly. And when you have regrets in life, you don't do. I never went up.
Jeez.
I was dedicated to my job.
For once.
For once. I was
But
charting
that
shots.
was a lifetime ago.
I was charting shots and trying to get Mrazek to the NHL. I was dedicated to my coaching craft.
Jeez.
So I missed the chance to hang out with Michael Jordan
man.
and just Chelios in a box.
Well, I think Muhammad Ali might be my
Really?
yeah, my biggest. And
that's big.
and a quick departure story. I was working in Grand Rapids, and Larry Holmes was fighting at Joe Louis Arena, and so we made the trek from Grand Rapids to interview Larry Holmes before this fight, or come to we didn't make the press conference, but the managers or the promoters said, "Come on back, you can," after Larry's done with his workout. So I went into the champ's dressing room, and so we're waiting there for the chance to interview him. And Larry Holmes comes in, just completely covered with sweat, and it was a guy's job, and then he stripped naked, and it was a guy's job to towel down Larry Holmes. So as Larry Holmes stood there without anything on,
Nothing.
some guy's job was to towel him down as he stood there. And I remember I filed that away, and I thought, no matter what job I have going forward in my life, it's gotta be better than that one.
That's a big ask.
Yeah. And this guy was probably, paid a ton of money.
He had to have
Did you
been.
say big ass?
That's why I said
okay.
it.
Yeah. Okay.
They went right by you.
I just wanted,
zoomed right by you again.
Wanted to be sure.
Another cool thing we did. I don't want to, just in case we get back to this list, was we won the one year we got to practice with the Tigers, and they were playing the Cubs that day.
Wow.
Cubs had a lot of cool guys on the field. So did the Tigers, for that matter. But I was in the bullpen at Tiger Stadium, fully geared up, and Jones was pitching to me. That was
Todd Jones?
Yeah, that was cool. I was amazed at how much
he's a beauty.
I was amazed at
we should have Todd Jones on a podcast.
We should. Great. I was amazed at how much the ball moved. Like the
It's
curves.
crazy. Yeah.
And because I'd never been a catcher before. And then I was in, so all these guys they're warming up. They weren't bringing the full heat. But I was like sitting there, I'm like, I don't have a cup on. And these curves are coming in. So I was like,
Were you single or married at the time?
No, I wasn't married at that time. Was that?
You probably weren't getting much action
96.
anyway, so it's not really a factor.
I was in the bullpen still. and but that was cool. And then Drapes takes batting practice.
Okay.
Then Drapes hit one out of Tiger Stadium, right field. And the Cubs guys are warming up in the outfield, right? However they do that, and the Tigers are in the infield, and he runs the bases. And I'll never forget the guys from the Cubs are looking at him like, what in the F is this guy doing? He's got his arm up in the air, ran the bases, hit it off the upper deck.
Yeah. Wow.
It was incredible.
Yeah, the overhang at Tiger
Drapes,
Stadium.
he's a lefty.
Yeah. I mean, hitting a pitched baseball is the hardest thing to do. With all due respect to you,
It is hard.
It's the hardest thing to do in sports. You don't know what's coming. You don't know where it's going, and your twitch reflex has to be instant.
But that was a cool encounter for sure.
All right. Just to finish the list. I mean, also on the list, Lollapalooza in '94. Iggy and the Stooges played.
Really?
In August of 2003, but they had to reschedule the show. Do you remember when Michigan and all of the Northeast was hit by that brownout?
Yeah.
Where they had, everybody lost power?
Yes.
I was on the road with the Tigers at the time, so unaffected by it, but concerned about family.
Most of the things for you now, you're unaffected by. You're affected by other things now, but we can't talk about that.
But the concern was just getting everybody safe to where they needed to be and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. All right, the last one's Big Sean, who I interviewed at the ballpark, who is a great dude, big Detroit promoter.
Yeah.
He brought out Drake and Nicki Minaj at that concert at Pine Knob.
That would have been great.
And the last one, Bob Seger.
Has to be Bob Seger.
The street on which Pine Knob sits is named for him.
Yeah. How many appearances at Pine Knob?
33 shows there.
Yeah.
And at one point, he played 8 straight nights at Pine Knob in 1977.
I saw him at the Palace. It was an unbelievable show.
Yeah.
So I've only been to 2 concerts at the Palace. 3. We're not going to count. Are you counting the Bare Naked Ladies? So
Sure.
I went Eagles, Bob Seger, Bare Naked Ladies.
That's not a bad list. Yeah. His last show was June of 2019, and he retired shortly thereafter. So
what a career!
And Bob Seger is somebody we're trying to get on our podcast too.
That would be in awe.
Yeah.
That
So if anybody knows a connection or is watching, let us know. We're trying to get to the great rocker here.
I have seen cover bands, right?
Sure.
AC/DC.
Yeah.
And where I live in British Columbia in Canada now, ACBC. That's what they called themselves, just so you know.
ACBC.
Yeah. I can't say it was one of the best concerts I've been to. I was in a field with beer gardens. The beer was atrocious, and the wind was blowing. There's dust everywhere, and they were singing cover. It was a cover band for AC/DC.
But the cover band industry has become
huge.
Big. I mean, it's like all these, and I guess people play because they want to be entertained by live music, even if it's by somebody that's didn't sing the original song.
That's the only one I've ever seen though.
Yeah.
Of a cover band.
Okay. We should have mentioned much earlier than this. We are going to be joined by the great Doc Emrick. The legendary broadcaster will join us from his home here in the great state of Michigan as Ozzy and Keats continues in but a moment. Hey, Bell Tire is changing tires and changing the tire game with the lowest tire prices, free flat repairs, tire rotations, and alignment checks. And they're not just changing tires. For decades, the Bell Tire Hockey Club has helped young athletes develop their skills, chase their dreams, and even reach the NHL. Stop by or go to belltire.com to see how they're different. Hey, Grand Valley State University is filling Michigan's talent pipeline. Graduates of the state's third largest university are moving Michigan forward with more than 86% of GVSU alumni working in and strengthening our state in well-paying careers. It's no wonder that in a recent survey, Michigan business leaders chose Grand Valley as the most excellent school in the state. Learn more at gvsu.edu/impact. We are thrilled to be joined by the Hall of Fame voice of not just the NHL, but so many things. Doc Emrick joining us from his home here in Michigan. First of all, it's great to see you. We'll talk hockey in just a second, but my first question to you is, how will your Pittsburgh Pirates do this year?
They will be very much like the letters at the bottom of their stationery. Member National League. Sadly, they will profit, but they will not spend much on players. They have two very, very good pitchers in Keller and Scanes, but they can't compete within their division. And so I will be a fan. And as Jerry Seinfeld said, it's about the material. I've been a fan since '59. And the uniforms are very nice, but I wish we had different guys in them.
Well, and the ballpark is very nice. It might be my favorite ballpark in all of baseball, of those that I've been to.
It is mine. I asked Bob Costas once to rank the ballparks, and he said, well, Fenway and Wrigley are in a separate category, and Pittsburgh and San Francisco are 1A and 1B.
Wow.
Those are the top shelf ones. It's a wonderful family ballpark, and people in Pittsburgh are pretty nice, as you know. And so it's a good place to come. You can see the skyline, and sometimes the guys on the field play pretty well. It's 162 games, and so they don't win them all. Nobody does, but it's something when in 1959, when I was 13, I became a Pirate fan. So there it is. I still am.
Nice.
Absolutely. Same with those of us here in Detroit who grew up rooting for the Tigers and are hoping for great things. But let's talk hockey. Do you have an all-time best Chris Osgood call or memory of the games that you watched the Red Wings play?
Yes. Chris was an innocent bystander on this one. There was an arena in Phoenix called America West Arena.
Sure.
Yeah.
And at the end of the arena that Chris defended one period, the best seat in hockey was the first row, because this place was designed for basketball. It was a high wall, and the first row was magnificent. The second row all the way up was awful because you couldn't see from the face-off dots into the net. And so they put up on long extensions monitors so that people, but they were only about 24 inches in height. So these people are watching monitors whenever the puck comes in deep. And at the benches, there was not enough room for the backup goaltender. And so the backup goalie for Detroit, for example, had to sit at the Zamboni end behind the net. And Phoenix had a very good team one year. It was 1998. Chris and his teammates were on the way to winning another championship. So the series was divided at 1 apiece. So game 3 was in Phoenix, and the Coyotes were ahead 3-2 with about 5 minutes to go in the third period. And Shanahan and Yzerman and Fedorov, they're just blasting away at poor Nikolai Hobby-Bulin. Chris is at the other end, and if he wanted to, he could have sold tickets for public skating at his end, because there wasn't much going on. Meanwhile, Kevin Hodgson is in the little chair behind the glass as the backup goaltender. And these guys just keep hammering away at Hobby-Bulin, and they're getting tired. And so Scotty decides, I'm not going to use my timeout right now. What I'm going to do is swap goalies. So he sent word for Don Koharski, the only referee, because it was one referee system, right, to go down and get Hodgson and have him change places with Osgood so that he could have a little breath for his guys that were out there wearing themselves out. So Koharski skates down to the other end where Chris is positioned in his net, and he comes back like this. Hodgson's not there. And so Scotty, somewhat chagrined, has to go back and continue playing. And of course, John Davidson and I are doing the game for Fox, and we're up there and we can see the empty chair, and our camera, of course, shows the empty chair. And we're all wondering, what the heck happened to Ticker Hodgson? And of course, we don't have the answer to the game. And I'm sure Ozzy got the answer right after the game was over. So now 5 or 6 years pass. And I figure the statute of limitations has gone. And one of the Red Wings who was scratched that day is now playing for another team. And I said, you remember that game in Phoenix where Osgood wasn't in the chair when they wanted him to go in and take? He said, yeah, I remember. I said, what happened there? He said, the Phoenix Suns were having a practice on their practice court, which was right next to that end of the hockey arena. And it was catered. and they had these cakes. And he was helping himself to the cakes when the word came out that he was going to be used. And he said he's running down the hallway in his goalie pads. He's got crumbs on his jersey. Anyway, the Red Wings eventually, though they didn't win the game, they won the series. Chris, of course, was one of the heroes of that. And I don't know how much you remember of that game, but...
oh, yeah. It's hard to keep Kevin Hodgson in order.
Yeah.
At best of times, let alone give him some time to think on a stool behind the net.
Well, you have great stories about what you witnessed in that chair when you're not on the bench, and the ice girls and the things that you're witnessing from that vantage point, because you're not effectively in the game.
Doc can attest for this. The backup goalies, we used to not be in the same shape they are in now. I will say that. Felt like a Talbot. He's got the hat on. It's all about, hey, look, when we were there, it was all about where's the food and where can we store snacks in our equipment. And it was Montreal. You love sitting across, or in Quebec, across from the bench, because you knew you were going to get first dibs on the hot dogs after the game or during the game, or whatever you had to eat. And it was always, I'd have like a Snickers with me. I loved Snickers back then. Kevin Hodgson always, but it was kind of a badge of honor. If you were on the bench or sitting there as a backup, you had the extra food. That's the way it worked.
Yeah, okay. It's a question you get asked 1,000 times, Doc. Do you have an all-time favorite call? No,
I really don't. I was so glad to be in arenas for free that however the game went, I called what I saw, and it was satisfying to be asked to do a game. So I was happy with however it turned out, as long as I didn't get in the way of the players, because the players were what we had to show to people. So no, I did not. Oh, by the way, on the subject of hot dogs, the late Peter McNabb told me that he was representing the Boston Bruins in Montreal, where they have those famous Chinchot, the great hot dogs. And he was a healthy scratch. So he went to the press box and was in for the press meal. And he said, I got about 6 of those things. And they were good. During the warm-up, the phone rings, and somebody got hurt in the warm-up. And I got to go down and suit up and play. And he said, the most miserable first period I ever had, loaded with dogs.
Jeez. I actually looked at someone, Sportsnet in Canada, ranked your top 10 calls. We got down, and they're fantastic, as everything you did was. And we are unabashed fans. But I get to number 1, and it's Marc-Andre Fleury making a save on Nick Lidstrom in 2009 to prevent the Red Wings from winning back-to-back Stanley Cups.
And
that was ranked number 1.
A perfect human, as you always say.
I'm so glad that I know a lot of people in the sport, and Nick's one of them. And if he'd have had an extra second to pull to his backhand, it might have been overtime because Nick was so good in close that way. But that was pretty exciting. Probably the same as Ozzy. Marc-Andre said when he was a child he wanted to make a save that would win a Stanley Cup. And years later, as a grown-up, he got a chance to do it. I remember Mike Babcock telling me that when he was coaching Anaheim and they lost the Stanley Cup final to New Jersey, he went in and spoke to his team, the Ducks, and then he went out and watched the Devils celebrate. And I thought it was ironic that 5 years later, he was with you guys in Pittsburgh, and that very close call near the end. Yeah, you handled it well. You know, I was up in the booth, of course, and I thought, you know, they got this, they got it. And then the puck changed hands, and all of a sudden they're coming back in on you. And it was a marvelous finish, and it was quite something. You know, Rafalski and all those guys were together at that time, and it was quite a team. And then the next year it went 7 games, and it turned the other way. Who would have thought Max Talbot, right? But it's you always have heroes in Stanley Cup finals that you don't expect. But that was those were good times in Detroit.
Yeah, 13 of the best games I've ever played in. Experienced dating 6 the one year, 7 the next year in the final. Get to play against Marc-Andre Fleury, who is younger than me, but I really respect a ton just his approach to the game. Doc, favorite? I mean, so many awards you've won, but we all have our favorite people we like to work with, don't we, John? Who's your favorite guy you've ever worked with in the booth at any given time?
Oh, gee, it's a multi-person tie, because you stop to think about working with John Davidson, who really wrote the description of this position, in that it became, rather than breezing in the afternoon of the game and just going up to the booth and reacting, John went to morning skates and he made notes, and he was very precise in how he did things. Bill Clement was the same way. Eddie Olczyk was the same way. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of guys, so it's a very difficult question to answer. I haven't really worked with anybody that was not somebody that really did their work. Sure. We had a lot of fun. All of us did. We had, Bill and I wound up in that 4 overtime game in Game 7 between the Islanders and Washington, where Pat LaFontaine won it, and he tied the tie around his head and did imitations of John Wayne and Boomer Jeffrey on during the intermission. And USA Today's columnist kept calling people at ESPN until they found somebody that didn't like it. And that's, of course, the critique that they published. But John Davidson, of course, he and I were working a game in Philadelphia. And at the same time, Fox had bought the rights to a new motion picture that had just left theaters called Mrs. Doubtfire.
Okay.
And at the morning skate, it was a 3:00 playoff game between Florida and Philadelphia that afternoon. And Mrs. Doubtfire was rolling at 7, regardless. And so they explained to me that morning that we've got a little bit of an issue here that may come up, but it may not. If we get to 7:00, there will be a card that you will have to read, and it will say, for those of you in these Eastern and Central time zones, and this is Philly and Florida,
Sure.
we will now bring you Mrs. Doubtfire. For those of you in the Mountain and Pacific, we will continue with the Flyers in Florida. And I'm thinking, oh, what are the chances? Of course, they're pretty good. And of course, it goes to 1 overtime and then to 2. So it's creeping up to 5 till 7. And John and I are kind of nodding to one another. And about 3 minutes to 7, I get the word in my headset, you won't have to read the card. We're going to stay on. About 10 after 7, Florida won the game. And I thought, well, there's another story to this. And as best we can tell, David Hill, who was the chief of sports at Fox, made a call to Rupert Murdoch. And he got Mrs. Doubtfire got delayed by a few minutes so that we could finish the game. But can you imagine how it had been in Philadelphia and in Florida if we'd have bailed out on a multi-overtime game? Oh, gee.
You sound great. You look great. I've made the same decision that you made a few years ago. What was involved in your decision to step away and retire?
Well, I won't say that the COVID didn't have a role in it, because the joy of doing the game was not only first preparing and second doing the game, but third sitting in a stall next to one of the players and finding out things that I could share with the audience. And as soon as we got to March of 2020, the NHL came out with a set of rules that we couldn't get to within 6 feet of the coach.
Right.
We had to have a boom microphone. We couldn't go into the dressing room. And, then we resumed the season, and I finished out working from home. And they were able to do whatever magic that they do to make sure that there wasn't a lag between the picture and my voice. And I thought, it's been 47 years of doing this, and this is good. I'd had 50 years of covering games. I'd had 40 years of NHL, and so it was a good time. And I haven't regretted it once. I like sitting here and watching games, watching you guys, and watching games and watching other guys work, and not having to learn lineups. If somebody goes back to get the puck, I don't have to care who it is. When I would watch games at home before, I had to do names and numbers because I wanted to be prepared. But life is a joy. My wife and I have 5 horses, mostly her pets. And we have one dog that you may have heard faintly in the distance that does what a dog is supposed to do. They make you laugh. So that's life these days. And I'm living in Michigan, and I watched Michigan State last night, and I watched Michigan the day before, and I watched the Red Wings as well.
So you cringe along with the rest of our viewers as you watch this one, and I, try to get through pre and post game shows. It's cringy television. Wouldn't you agree? It's cringy television.
I know it's hard sometimes. It was last year, all of a sudden, it was that one gap where they just started losing a bunch of games, and then they charged hard near the end. And this year, it looks like it's a faint hope. And I'm sad about that, because so many people here care so much about that team. And they watch you guys, and they're waving at the camera from behind all the time and chanting Ozzy and doing all of that. But they care so much about the team. And so you feel sad when it doesn't perform well. Marty Brodeur, I was with Marty for 18 years. And when the trapezoid came in, he said, I think my goal scoring is done. Was the trapezoid, when the trapezoid was in, did you score your goal then?
No,
or was
it was
after?
out. I scored in the mall in Hartford. There was no trapezoid there. What a rink that was. It was outstanding. But when they brought it, I think now they should take it out. It really hinders the goal. I think it's a part of the game that needs to come back into it. But Marty Brodeur worked his way around it, though, and really he's one of the guys. Ron Hextall, Marty Brodeur is why I played the puck, or tried to.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah,
yeah,
or tried to.
He did it because of Hextall, like you said.
Yeah.
But which cup did you like the most?
Did I like the most? 08.
Yeah.
Not because I went in for Dom, but because had a lot of older players on our team. We were 35, 36. It was now in the cap era. We weren't supposed to be able to win in the cap era. It was a lot harder for us that year. I think we finished third or fourth in the standings. We really came all together. We had some characters on our team. Chris Chelios was back. Darren McCarty had come back from a lot of tough situations. He'd be in another lineup that year. He was a great mentor off the ice for the kids. We had Dallas Drake, who never won a cup before.
Yeah.
I'll never forget Dallas Drake was in the penalty box 5-on-3. Looked like he was going to throw up in the last game. He said he couldn't even watch the last 10 minutes of the game. And I love hearing stories like that because that's how much it means to guys to win the Stanley Cup, where he couldn't even watch the last 8 minutes of the game. And I'm sure glad I didn't watch the last minute of that because they almost scored. But anyways, it's just, I love hearing the stories of Nick Lindstrom's the first European captain. We know those stories, but the stories in the perimeter about guys who have just really fought and clawed their whole way up just for that one moment is just it's great stuff. So that year would have been my favorite year just because there's so many variables in it.
All right, we're going to take a break. I want to get the connection that Doc has between himself and Brett Favre when we come back. Big thanks to Bell Tire here for supporting this podcast and for always putting the customer first. Whether it's offering the lowest tire prices, getting you in and out faster, or making tire buying and auto care easier, Bell Tire is changing tires and changing the experience for the better. Stop by Bell Tire or visit belltire.com to see the difference for yourself. And it wasn't just hockey that Doc Emrick described so eloquently over so many years. So there were other sports as well in the Olympics, but it was football for a time. And in 1992, it was the first game that Brett Favre played, and you were working that game, as I understand it?
Yeah, the first game he played for the Packers, he got in, I think, a few snaps with Atlanta the previous year. But anyway, CBS needed somebody to work the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. And I was with the Flyers then, and they didn't care as long as I didn't miss one of their games. Well, it was early September, so I wasn't going to miss one of their games. Anyway, the first 2 games, because Tim Ryan was normally the partner with a brand new guy that they had who had just retired from playing, Matt Millen. And so I needed to work the first 2 games. And the first one was Minnesota at Green Bay. And Favre did not play in that game. And the second one was Green Bay at Tampa Bay. Well, before the first game, which was Mike Holmgren's first game as coach, Dennis Green's first game as coach of Minnesota. Anyway, we went down and talked to Mike, and he said, "Did you talk to our quarterback?" And because we talked to several players, and I said, "Yeah, we just spoke with Mikowski a few minutes ago. He was going to be the starter for Green Bay in game 1." And he said, No, I mean the other guy." And I said, "No, we didn't." He said, "Well, let me tell you about this guy. He lives in a little town in the South. His dad was his high school football coach. And he got in a little trouble down there this past summer. And so I called his house, and he lives on the same address as his father and mother do. And I called down there, and I said, and it rang, and his father picked up the phone. And I said, "Is Brett there?" And his father said, "No, he's not, but I know why you're calling, Coach, and we got that settled with the sheriff. Everything's fine." Said, I want I want to talk to your son. So anyway, they hooked up a few minutes later, and Mike said, I told him, look, if you want to be out and carry on all night and be involved with the law, I'll trade you back to Jerry Glanville in Atlanta because he likes that type of athlete. But if you want to come up here to Green Bay, there's a little bit more of a straight and narrow here, but I think you can help us and help us a lot. And so he agreed to do that.
Wow.
So anyway, in the second game in Tampa Bay, Mikowski's not moving the team, and there's a part of legend that he was actually injured. But regardless, Favre comes trotting into the game. And so he drops back to throw a pass, and one of the Tampa Bay linemen charges at him, and it hits the lineman in the chest and comes right back into Favre, who catches it for a loss. So his first pass as a Packer was a completion, but it was to himself.
That's absolute gold. Tell people what you're doing these days. You're dabbling in the podcast business for a bit. Share that.
Not exactly podcasts. NBC, when I retired, said, "Will you do some video features for us?" And so that's what I've been doing ever since 5 years ago. The most recent one was in late February. It involved the 1980 Olympic team and the game between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, but it was a totally different take on it. The game, as John, you'll probably recall, was delayed taped and played back later that night on ABC. But there was one live broadcast because in 1980, the Olympic Committee allowed a local radio station, rights-free, to broadcast any Olympic events they wanted to do. They wanted to encourage local involvement with the Olympics. And so there was a radio station, 1,000 watts, 250 nighttime, that was going to have the right to do any events they wanted. And of course they did that. So I found the two guys that did the game, and they are still living. They're lifetime residents of Lake Placid. And so they reflected back on doing that game that night, and that the little village of 2,600 did not sleep.
Beautiful.
Oh, good stuff, Doc. I love that you're in my favorite division in hockey, although I was a Red Wing, but you know what division I'm talking about. In New York, Rangers, Devils, Flyers, there's rivals aplenty there. Favorite Madison Square Garden moment? I played there a few times, played there on St. Patrick's Day once with the Islanders. That was fun, but not fun. But an enjoyable moment. Chaos
would be a good description.
And I know the rivalry. I thought Islanders, Rangers were rivalry, but I know the Devils, Rangers, how big that is. One of your favorite moments in that rival?
Well, I grew up in the IHL of the 1970s, so that's going to color my answer. I remember a couple of times, but one in particular off the face-off, that as soon as the puck hit the ice, there were three fights at once. And fortunately, they were spread out, but we were able to cover them on NBC, all three of the scraps. And they were pretty big ones, and even the coaches were yelling at one another. So there were a lot of wonderful hockey plays and overtime games at Madison Square Garden. But I remember the crowd there, of course, is rather surly. But one night in a playoff game, Philadelphia was playing at the Rangers, and we were getting ready for the game, and I'm hearing this chant during the warm-up. And so I took my headset off, and Brad Marsh of the Flyers didn't wear a helmet, and he had just gotten a haircut, and it was right down to his skull. And the chant from the Garden was, "Who cut your hair? Who cut your hair?"
Wow. Hey, you are a legend to us. We can't thank you enough for your time. We hope that we were able to cross paths with you soon, because you're the absolute best. Thanks for putting up with us for a bit here.
I know during the stretch there in '08, I got a chance to meet Chris's father. And he and I had a discussion about Chris's career and how it was one of those careers that gets evaluated for the Hall of Fame. I think it still should, but one of the things I learned about the Hall of Fame is that it takes time sometimes for that to happen. And in the case of Mark Howe, it took a lot of years, but it did happen. So all I would say is the credentials are still there, and don't give up.
Spectacular.
That's spectacular. Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks, Doc.
Okay.
We
Good job.
appreciate
All
your
right.
time, and we thank
you.
everybody for watching on YouTube and listening, and we'll see you next time.